Imagine the clash of shields, the roar of battle, and at the heart of it, Viking women fighting side by side with men. They weren't just legends whispered in sagas, they were Shieldmaidens, warriors who struck fear into their enemies and shattered every expectation of their time. With swords flashing and axes raised, these deadly women of the north commanded ships, led raids, and defended their homelands with fire in their hearts. Were they myth? Were they real? Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the Shieldmaidens, the most fearless Viking women to ever walk the earth. The northern sky was black with storm clouds, a sea of thunder rolling above the fjords. The air reeked of salt and iron, and the crash of waves against jagged cliffs was as fierce as the roar of warriors charging into battle. On such nights, the sagas say, the gods themselves tested the hearts of mortals. In a village carved into the coastline of Norway, firelight flickered from the great longhouse. Inside, Viking men sharpened blades and repaired shields, while the Viking women carried food, stoked the hearth, and sang songs that steadied trembling hands. Among them moved the young Shieldmaidens, daughters of farmers, fishers, and jarls alike, but more importantly, daughters of the storm. They were raised not only to weave and cook, but to fight. With axes strapped to their belts and hair braided tight, they were taught to match the strength of men on the training grounds. The Vikings believed strength came not from muscle alone, but from will, and the Shieldmaidens had wills as unyielding as oak. That night, the sea raged. A fleet of longships waited in the bay, their dragon-headed prows biting at the darkness. Men muttered prayers to Thor for thunder's blessing and to Odin for wisdom. But it was the women, those fierce Shieldmaidens, who gathered on the cliffs, staring at the waters with eyes like sharpened steel. One among them, Freydis, daughter of a seasoned raider, raised her round shield. Its rim was dented from endless drills, its paint chipped by blows, but she held it proudly. "Storms do not frighten us," she said, her voice cutting through the roar of the wind. "We are the storm." The crowd of warriors answered with a cheer that rattled the beams of the longhouse. These were not fragile maidens to be sheltered. They were Viking women, carved by hardship and sharpened by battle. Stories whispered that when they joined the shield wall, even hardened raiders felt the blood sing in their veins, for a Shieldmaiden's courage made men braver. The drums began to thunder. The raid was at hand. Torches lit the shoreline, casting long shadows as the warriors filed onto the longships. The air was thick with smoke, sweat, and salt spray. Freydis and her sisters climbed aboard, planting their shields along the rails, their eyes locked on the horizon. As the ships pushed into the storm, lightning cracked the sky, illuminating their faces painted in streaks of blue and red, symbols of protection, vengeance, and fate. The sea tossed the vessels like toys, but no one faltered. Every oar that cut into the waves was matched by the rhythm of beating hearts, fierce and relentless. And so, the saga began, not of kings or jarls, but of women who defied the storm and became it. They would carve their names into memory, not with whispers, but with steel, blood, and fire. The Shieldmaidens had risen. Steel rang against steel in the training yard. The clangor echoed through the village like the beat of a war drum, sharp and unyielding. Sweat steamed from bare arms, despite the cold morning air, and the smell of iron mixed with wood smoke as the blacksmiths hammered fresh edges onto blades. Here, strength was not a gift, it was forged. The Shieldmaidens trained where the men did, beneath the watchful eyes of warriors, scarred by 100 battles. For them, there was no gentleness. An axe struck just as hard whether swung at man or woman, and a shield shattered just as easily. To falter was to bleed. To endure was to earn honour. Freydis stood at the centre of the yard, shield raised, axe clenched in her hand. Across from her, a boy just a year older lunged with a spear. The crowd jeered as the point darted toward her chest. But she twisted, slammed the rim of her shield into the boy's side. and sent him sprawling in the mud. Gasps turned to cheers. "Again," barked the old captain, overseeing the drill. "A shield maiden must strike like Thor's hammer and endure like Yggdrasil's roots." No hesitation. The boy scrambled to his feet, shame red on his cheeks, while Freydis planted her shield and readied herself again. She did not smile. Victories were not to be celebrated in the yard, only on the battlefield where death listened. Around her, others trained just as fiercely. Some practiced with sword and spear, others with bow and shield. They fought in pairs and trios, learning to hold the shield wall tight enough that no blade could slip through. Bruises blossomed on skin, blood trickled from split lips, but no one complained. Pain was proof of progress. At the far end of the yard, embers glowed in the forge. The blacksmiths hammered iron into axe heads, sparks leaping like fire spirits. Each blow echoed a truth, that Vikings were not born warriors. They were made in fire, iron, and the grind of endless struggle. The weapons they carried were not just tools of war, but symbols of their will. When training ended, Freydis sat by the forge, watching sparks fly. Her hands trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes gleamed. An elder shield maiden named Astrid approached, her hair streaked with silver, her shield scarred from countless battles. "You fight well," Astrid said, handing Freydis a flask of mead. "But strength alone is not enough. You must learn patience. A shield maiden's weapon is not her axe, it is her mind. The man who rushes into battle dies first. The woman who watches, who waits, who strikes, when the gods demand it, that woman carves sagas." Freydis drank deeply, the honeyed burn warming her throat. She nodded, though her heart burned for glory now, not later. Still, she listened. Astrid's voice carried the weight of truth. As the sun sank behind the mountains, the village gathered for feasting. Warriors raised horns of mead, children clambered onto benches, and skalds sang of heroes past. But among the shield maidens, there was no rest. They whispered of the raids to come, of the blood that would soon stain their axes, and of the names they would earn when the sagas spoke of them. Forged in fire, sharpened in iron, they were ready. The night was cold and clear, the kind of night where the stars shone like steel scattered across black velvet. Above them stretched the endless northern sky, vast and eternal, a silent witness to the vows of men and women who would carve their lives into history. In the heart of the village, the great fire roared. Warriors gathered around it, their shadows leaping like restless spirits upon the timbered walls of the longhouse. The air was thick with the smell of pine resin, roasting meat and mead, but also with anticipation. For tonight was no mere feast, it was the night of oaths. The chieftain rose, his beard braided with silver rings, his hand gripping a sword older than the village itself. He spoke of raids to come, of distant shores rich with plunder, of enemies who would kneel or perish. Every Viking knew that raiding was more than survival, it was destiny. To raid was to honour the gods. To fall was to feast in Valhalla. When his speech ended, silence fell. Then, one by one, warriors stepped forward to swear their vows beneath the northern sky. A man swore to bring back silver enough to fill his wife's arms. Another vowed to slay the chieftain of a rival clan. A boy, barely grown, promised not to return until he had spilled the blood of an enemy. But when Freydis stepped forward, murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman standing among men. She held her round shield in one hand and raised her axe in the other, her eyes burning with the fire of the storm. "I swear before Odin Allfather and before Thor the Thunderer," she said, her voice carrying across the longhouse, "that I will not rest until my name is carved into saga and stone. I will not falter in storm nor battle. My shield will not break, my axe will not dull, and my spirit will not bow. I am Freydis, daughter of the North, and by the gods I swear to become a storm upon the whale road." The warriors roared their approval, banging shields against tables, horns of mead sloshing. Some cheered out of respect, others out of disbelief, but none could deny the courage of her words. Behind her, Astrid, the elder Shieldmaiden, stepped forward as well. Her oath was simpler, but heavy as iron. I swear to protect the daughters who rise after me, so that the Shieldmaiden's name will never fade. While my blood runs, the North will remember. The fire crackled, sparks flying into the night sky, as though the gods themselves marked the moment. Overhead, the stars shimmered brighter, and in the northern horizon, faint bands of green light flickered the aurora, the veil of the Valkyries. The Skalds would later swear that the Valkyries had watched that night, choosing who among the Shieldmaidens would one day join them. When dawn came, the longships would set sail, but tonight, beneath the endless northern sky, oaths had been forged as strong as iron, and the North had gained warriors whose names would echo in eternity. The morning air was sharp enough to cut lungs, and frost still clung to the earth when the warriors gathered in the yard. Shields thumped against shields, and weapons gleamed with frost, waiting to be baptized in sweat and blood. This was no mere drill. Today, the training ground demanded sacrifice. The chieftain had decreed that all who had sworn oaths must prove them. Every warrior, man or woman, would fight until the ground itself tasted iron. No excuses, no mercy, only strength. Freydis stood among them, her shield strapped tight, her axe humming with anticipation. Across from her waited a seasoned warrior, Bjorn Iron Hand, his forearms as thick as oak branches, and his beard stiff with frost. He sneered when he saw her, muttering loud enough for others to hear. The gods laugh at this, a woman in the yard, as if weaving cloth wasn't enough. The crowd rumbled, some laughing, others watching silently. Freydis did not answer. Words were wasted breath when steel spoke louder. The signal horn blared. Bjorn came forward like a storm, his sword flashing toward her ribs. Freydis blocked with her shield, the impact jolting her arm numb. He struck again, heavy and merciless, driving her backward. Mud splattered, and the onlookers roared. But Freydis endured. Each blow rattled her bones, each swing threatened to crush her, yet she held her ground. Then, when Bjorn's sword grew wild with confidence, she twisted, slamming the rim of her shield into his jaw. The crack of bone silenced the crowd. Before he could recover, her axe swept low, biting into his leg. Blood sprayed, hot against the cold air, and the giant toppled into the mud. The yard erupted half with outrage, half with awe. The chieftain stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He studied Bjorn writhing in pain, then turned to Freydis, whose chest heaved with fury and triumph. "Blood has been spilled," he said, voice booming. "And the ground remembers. Freydis, daughter of the North. You have proven yourself before gods and men. No shield maiden here shall be mocked again." Astrid's eyes glimmered with pride, though she remained silent. Other women in the yard straightened, their hands tightening on weapons, fire in their hearts. Freydis's victory was not hers alone, it was theirs. Yet the training did not end. The rest of the day, warriors clashed in pairs, blood dripping into the earth, cries of pain and rage filling the air. Some left limping, others unconscious, and a few carried away, their bodies broken beyond healing. The ground became slick with crimson, a reminder that Viking life was carved not in comfort, but in suffering. When the final horn sounded, Freydis stood taller than she had ever stood. Her arm ached, her knuckles were raw, and Bjorn's blood still stained her axe. But she felt unbreakable, as though the Norns themselves had woven her destiny tighter that day. The training grounds had tasted her blood and her enemies, and in the eyes of the North, she was no longer merely a girl with an axe, she was a warrior. The fjord lay quiet at dawn, its waters dark as hammered steel. Mist curled low across the surface, hiding the longships that waited like wolves ready to leap. Each ship's dragon-headed prow snarled at the horizon, eager to taste foreign shores. The warriors gathered, weapons strapped. shields stacked along the hulls in perfect rows. The scent of pine tar and salt filled the air. They had sharpened their blades through the night, whispering prayers to Odin and Tyr, gods of war. Today, those prayers would be answered. Freydis stood among them, her fingers tight on the grip of her axe. This was no training ground, no test beneath watchful eyes. This was the raid, the proving ground of every Viking warrior. She had sworn her oath beneath the northern sky, spilled blood in the yard, and now the sea would carry her into destiny. The chieftain raised his sword. Today, the Whale Road opens. We strike the coast to the south, where soft men guard fat treasures. The gods demand blood, and we shall give it. A roar surged across the longships. Shields banged against hulls, oars slapped the water, and horns bellowed deep enough to stir the fjord's depths. The ships leapt forward, slicing through the mist, warriors chanting in rhythm with the oars. Odin owns us all. Odin owns us all. The sea carried them swiftly, and soon the coastline emerged. A small village clinging to the shore, smoke rising lazily from its thatched roofs. Its people were just waking, unaware of the storm about to break upon them. The longships crashed onto the beach. Warriors leapt into the shallows, boots splashing, shields raised, weapons gleaming in the morning light. The villagers screamed, some running, others scrambling for weapons. But they were no match for the Vikings. Steel met flesh, and the sand turned red. Freydis struck with the fury of her oaths. She buried her axe in a man's shoulder, ripped it free, and swung again. Each blow was a thunderclap, each strike a defiance of those who had doubted her. A boy rushed her with a spear, but she twisted, split his shaft with her axe, and slammed her shield into his face. Around her, the air was filled with the clash of swords, the cries of the dying, and the roar of warriors drunk on the joy of slaughter. Houses burned as torches flew, smoke billowing into the sky. Women and children were dragged to the shore, their cries drowned by the chant of victory. The raid was brutal, swift, and merciless. When it ended, the beach was littered with bodies, the village in flames, and the ships heavy with plunder, silver, livestock, slaves. As the longships pushed back into the sea, the warriors raised their horns in triumph. Freydis stood at the prow, blood dripping from her axe, the salt wind whipping her hair. She gazed back at the burning village, not with pity, but with fire in her eyes. For the first time, she had raided. For the first time, she had felt the storm of Viking life upon foreign shores. And she knew it would not be the last. The longships cut through the sea, heavy with plunder, but the greatest prize carried back to the north was not silver nor slaves, it was pride. The warriors returned as heroes, their deeds already shaping into sagas that skalds would one day sing by firelight. Yet for Freydis and Astrid, the raid had brought something greater, the recognition that women could fight as fiercely as any man. When the fleet reached the fjord, the villagers gathered on the shore to welcome them home. Horns blared, children shouted, and wives rushed to embrace their husbands. But among the crowd, all eyes turned to Freydis and Astrid, still blood-stained, their shields battered but unbroken. Some looked with awe, others with unease, yet none could deny the truth they had stood as warriors. That night, the longhouse roared with celebration. Fires burned bright, mead flowed freely, and stories of the raid filled the air. Bjorn Iron Hand, still limping from the training yard defeat, raised his horn reluctantly. "Freydis," he grunted, "you fight like the wolf bitch herself. I will not mock you again." Laughter erupted, and even Freydis smiled. Respect, once denied, was now hers. But the night's revelry was not only for glory. The chieftain rose, his voice carrying over the din. Raids are not won by single blades. They are won by the wall by warriors who stand shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, so no foe may break them. Tonight, I saw something new. Not only men, but women held the line. From this day, those who take up shield and sword, whether man or maiden, will be honoured as warriors of the wall. The hall shook with approval. Later, beneath the cool night sky, Astrid clasped Freydis's arm. "Sister, the gods have woven our fates together. You saw it on the beach, did you not? When the enemy pressed us, and you were at my side, our shields locked, our blades striking as one. That is what made us unbreakable." Freydis nodded, her heart still burning from battle. "A shield alone is strong, but a wall of shields is stronger. Together we cannot be broken." And so, the oath was made. From that night forward, Freydis and Astrid vowed never to fight apart. Wherever the raid took them on sea or land, against farmer or king, they would stand together in the shield wall. They would fight as sisters, not by blood, but by steel and fate. In the days that followed, others came to join them. Young women, once bound to loom and spindle, now gripped spear and axe. They trained in the yard, bled in the mud, and learned to move as one. Freydis and Astrid led them, teaching not only how to fight, but how to hold the line. The men watched with wary eyes, but soon even they admitted a truth that no one could deny. When women fought side by side with men, the shield wall grew stronger. Thus began the rise of the Shieldmaidens, deadly women of the north, sisters of the wall, bound by blood and battle. And the sagas had only begun. The raids had brought glory, silver, and songs of triumph, but with glory came whispers. Old women muttered in corners, speaking of omens carried home from the burning village. Crows gathered thick on rooftops, black wings blotting out the moon. Strange dreams haunted warriors, dreams of blood that did not dry, and waves that rose higher than mountains. The Vikings, though fierce, did not laugh at such signs, for they knew well that the Norns, those three women who spun the threads of fate, wove all lives, from thrall to jarl. One night, as storms howled beyond the fjord, Freydis wandered from the longhouse. Sleep had fled her, chased by dreams of fire and chains. She found Astrid waiting near the sacred grove, where ancient ash trees whispered in the wind. Between them, an old Volva the seeress waited, wrapped in furs, her staff tipped with iron. Her eyes, clouded with age, burned like embers. "You hear them, child," the seeress rasped. "The threads call to you." Freydis tightened her grip on her axe. "I hear only the storm." The woman's laugh was like dry leaves. "The storm is the voice of the gods, and the Norns whisper through it. Do you think your strength alone has brought you this far? Number. You are bound to a fate greater than raids and silver. You are bound to the weaving of the Shieldmaidens' destiny." Astrid stepped forward, her voice wary. "What destiny? Speak plain." The seeress lifted her staff, pointing toward the sea. "I see fire on the whale road, and blood upon the shore. I see sisters of the shield wall, standing unbroken, while kingdoms fall. But I also see chains, betrayal, and the shadow of a wolf that devours the Sunday." The storm broke overhead, lightning splitting the sky. For a moment, Freydis thought she saw figures in the flashes, women taller than men, cloaked in mist, spinning and cutting threads that glowed like fire. The vision chilled her, yet it also set her blood aflame. "Why show us this?" she demanded. "Because," the seeress hissed, "you stand at a crossroads. The path of the Shield Maiden will carve glory into the sagas, but it will also demand sacrifice. Blood your own, and that of those you love." The words struck harder than any blade. Freydis looked to Astrid, who met her gaze with fire instead of fear. "Let the Norns weave as they will. We are Vikings. We do not bow to fate, we fight it." The seeress's smile was thin, knowing. "Even when you fight it, child, you walk the thread they have spun." The storm raged long into the night, but the sisters of the shield wall did not turn back. If fate called them to blood and fire, then they would meet it as Vikings, shield to shield, axe in hand. And in the halls of the gods, the Norns watched, their whispers lost in the thunder. At dawn, the village awoke to a sky painted in red. Clouds streaked across the horizon like wounds, and from the tallest pine came the cry of a raven. The bird's black wings stretched wide as it circled above the longhouse, its harsh call breaking the silence of morning. The Vikings stirred uneasily. To them, the raven was more than a bird. It was the eye of Odin, the Allfather, who sent his winged messengers, Hugin and Munin, to carry word of the world. When a raven perched above a hall, it meant the gods themselves were watching. Freydis stood at the doorway, hand resting on her shield, eyes locked on the dark shape above. Astrid joined her, whispering, "The Ceres's words still cling to my mind. Now Odin's raven comes. Do you think this is his sign?" Freydis's jaw tightened. "If it is, then it means only one thing. He calls us to war." The horn sounded soon after. The chieftain gathered the warriors in the yard, his voice carrying like thunder. "Scouts have returned. Across the sea, a Saxon earl gathers men and steel. He plans to strike us when the snows melt. We will not wait to be slaughtered like sheep. We will take the fight to him. We sail in 3 days." The yard erupted in cheers, though some voices were edged with fear. The Saxons were no mere farmers, they were armoured knights, drilled in the ways of war. Yet to the Vikings, danger only sharpened glory. That night, as warriors sharpened blades and fletched arrows, Freydis and Astrid prepared alongside them. Men no longer questioned their place among the fighters. Their courage on the raid and their unbroken stance in the shield wall had carved them a place in the warband. Still, whispers of fate and prophecy followed them like shadows. As they trained in the cold night, the raven descended again, landing on the post of the practice yard. Its black eyes glimmered in the firelight. Astrid froze, spear in hand. "Why does it follow us?" she murmured. Freydis stepped forward, unafraid, meeting the raven's gaze. "Because Odin has marked us. He sends his bird to see if we are worthy of the sagas." The raven gave a harsh cry, flapped its wings, and soared into the night. Both women watched until it vanished into the clouds. The following morning, a scold rose in the longhouse and sang, "Where ravens gather, battle comes. Where women rise, fate is undone. The Allfather calls, and blood shall answer." The men pounded their shields in rhythm with the song. The sound shook the beams of the hall and echoed across the fjord, a drumbeat of war. The raven's cry had been heard. Its call was clear, and when the longships set out, their sails billowing black and red against the sea, Freydis and Astrid stood among the Vikings' shields high, blades ready, eyes burning with the fire of destiny. The raven would not be disappointed. The sea was cruel that week, its grey waves thrashing the longships as though eager to swallow them whole. Yet the Vikings pressed on, their oars cutting through the storm. Salt spray lashed their faces, but their eyes burned with hunger for battle. At the prow of one ship, Freydis stood tall, her shield strapped to her arm, her hair whipping like a banner in the wind. The raven flew above them, black against the storm sky. To the men, it was a sign of Odin's favour. To Freydis, it was a weight, a reminder of the Ceres's warning. On the third morning, the coastline appeared. Green cliffs rose out of the mist, crowned with a wooden fortress. Saxon banners flapped in the wind. Warriors gathered on the shore, shields gleaming like bronze teeth. The Vikings grinned at the sight. The longships crashed onto the beach, their prows biting into sand. Shields locked, spears bristled. The chieftain roared, "For Odin!" and the shield wall advanced. Freydis and Astrid fought at the front, shoulder to shoulder with hardened men. The Saxons came at them in waves, armoured knights with swords that flashed like fire. Yet for every knight that struck, a Viking answered with axe and fury. The Shieldmaidens fought like wolves unleashed. Freydis's axe split a helm, the man beneath collapsing like a felled tree. Astrid's spear thrust past a shield rim, piercing through mail and bone. Blood painted the sand, and the cries of dying men rose like a grim chorus. A Saxon knight, towering and broad, broke through the line. His sword cleaved a Viking's shield in two, sending splinters flying. He roared and swung for Astrid. Freydis lunged, intercepting the blow with her own shield. The force rattled her bones, but she held, shoving the knight back. Astrid's spear flashed, and the man fell. For a moment, the battle slowed. Eyes turned toward the women. To the Saxons, it seemed as though Valkyries themselves had descended to the battlefield death maidens sent by Odin to harvest souls. The fear spread like fire. Men muttered prayers, retreating even as their leaders screamed for courage. The Vikings seized the moment. The shield wall surged, axes hacking, spears thrusting. The Saxon line broke, scattering toward the fortress. When the fighting ended, the sand was red, the tide carrying corpses out to sea. Ravens swooped down, pecking at the fallen. The Vikings raised their weapons and roared in triumph. Among them, Freydis and Astrid stood bloodied but unbroken. To their kin, they were no longer merely women with blades. They were something greater, something half mortal, half divine. The Skalds would not call them Shieldmaidens. They would call them Valkyries among men. That night, as firelight flickered against the fortress walls, songs rose in the longhouse. Skalds sang of the two sisters who fought like daughters of Odin, their blades carving fear into the hearts of kings. And above, the raven perched on the roof beam, silent witness to their glory. The fortress had fallen by dusk, its gates splintered beneath Viking axes, its halls plundered for gold, mead, and steel. Fires licked at the wooden towers, turning the night sky crimson. Yet, even amid victory, the Vikings knew caution. The Saxons who fled could return with reinforcements, and every shadow might hide an enemy blade. That night, the warriors feasted within the stolen hall. Roasted meat crackled on spits, mead flowed like rivers, and voices rose in song. Shields banged against the tables, echoing with the rhythm of triumph. But while others revelled, Freydis and Astrid remained watchful, seated near the door, weapons close at hand. When the moon rose high, pale and round as a shield, the feasting began to quiet. Some men slept where they sat, others stumbled outside to collapse in the grass. The sisters exchanged a glance. Victory had made their kin careless. Freydis whispered, "The night is not safe. I'll take watch." Astrid nodded, gripping her spear. "Then I'll stand beside you." They left the hall and stepped into the cold night air. The moonlight silvered the ruins of the fortress, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked earth. The wind carried strange whispers, the kind that made warriors tighten their grips on their weapons. Then it came the faint crunch of boots in the distance. The sisters froze. Freydis signalled with 2 fingers, and they moved quietly toward the sound, shields ready. From the tree line emerged dark figures, armoured and silent. Saxons. Not broken villagers, but trained fighters, those who had hidden and waited for night to strike. The clash came sudden and sharp. Steel rang beneath the moonlight. Astrid thrust her spear into the chest of the first man, but another lunged from behind. Freydis's axe intercepted, carving him down. More Saxons rushed forward, their faces painted with ash and hate. The fight was swift and brutal. Freydis spun her axe in wide arcs, driving foes back. Astrid fought with precision, each thrust placed with deadly calm. Together, they moved like 2 halves of the same storm, chaos and control, fury and focus. But the Saxons were many, and soon their shouts stirred the drunken Vikings inside. Warriors staggered from the hall, some still clutching drinking horns. When they saw the ambush, they roared in fury, rallying with axe and sword. The battle spilled across the moonlit field. Fire from the fortress glowed behind them, painting warriors in red and silver. Men fell, blood soaking the grass, yet the Vikings' ferocity could not be matched. At last, the Saxons broke. Those who lived fled into the woods, swallowed by the dark. The field fell silent, save for the groans of the dying and the crackle of fire. Freydis wiped her blade, breath ragged. Astrid leaned on her spear, her eyes fixed on the moon above. "Blades in the moonlight," she whispered. "That's what they'll remember." And indeed, the skalds who would tell the tale would remember that night, not the feast nor the plunder, but the women who stood against blades in the silver glow of the moon and did not falter. The longships cut through the sea, heavy with plunder, but the greatest prize carried back to the north was not silver nor slaves, it was pride. The warriors returned as heroes, their deeds already shaping into sagas that skalds would one day sing by firelight. Yet for Freydis and Astrid, the raid had brought something greater, the recognition that women could fight as fiercely as any man. When the fleet reached the fjord, the villagers gathered on the shore to welcome them home. Horns blared, children shouted, and wives rushed to embrace their husbands. But among the crowd, all eyes turned to Freydis and Astrid, still blood-stained, their shields battered but unbroken. Some looked with awe, others with unease, yet none could deny the truth they had stood as warriors. That night, the longhouse roared with celebration. Fires burned bright, mead flowed freely, and stories of the raid filled the air. Bjorn Iron Hand, still limping from the training yard defeat, raised his horn reluctantly. "Freydis," he grunted, "you fight like the wolf bitch herself. I will not mock you again." Laughter erupted, and even Freydis smiled. Respect, once denied, was now hers. But the night's revelry was not only for glory. The chieftain rose, his voice carrying over the din. "Raids are not won by single blades. They are won by the wall by warriors who stand shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, so no foe may break them. Tonight, I saw something new. Not only men, but women held the line. From this day, those who take up shield and sword, whether man or maiden, will be honoured as warriors of the wall." The hall shook with approval. Later, beneath the cool night sky, Astrid clasped Freydis's arm. "Sister, the gods have woven our fates together. You saw it on the beach, did you not? When the enemy pressed us, and you were at my side, our shields locked, our blades striking as one. That is what made us unbreakable." Freydis nodded, her heart still burning from battle. "A shield alone is strong, but a wall of shields is stronger. Together we cannot be broken." And so, the oath was made. From that night forward, Freydis and Astrid vowed never to fight apart. Wherever the raid took them on sea or land, against farmer or king, they would stand together in the shield wall. They would fight as sisters, not by blood, but by steel and fate. In the days that followed, others came to join them. Young women, once bound to loom and spindle, now gripped spear and axe. They trained in the yard, bled in the mud, and learned to move as one. Freydis and Astrid led them, teaching not only how to fight, but how to hold the line. The men watched with wary eyes, but soon even they admitted a truth that no one could deny. When women fought side by side with men, the shield wall grew stronger. Thus began the rise of the Shieldmaidens, deadly women of the north, sisters of the wall, bound by blood and battle. And the sagas had only begun. The fortress smouldered behind them, its towers broken, its defenders slain or enslaved. The fjord echoed with victory cries, the clash of weapons against shields, and the chants of men who had tasted glory. Yet, amid the spoils of conquest, it was not gold or mead that the warriors spoke of most, it was the Shieldmaidens. Freydis and Astrid had carved their names into the saga of the siege. Warriors swore they had seen Freydis split a Saxon captain from crown to collarbone with a single stroke. Others claimed Astrid fought like a storm given flesh, her spear striking faster than the eye could follow. Songs were already rising in the smoke, carried by drunken voices that would one day become legends. That night, in the hall newly claimed as their own, the Vikings gathered. The chieftain raised his horn of mead, foam spilling down his beard as he spoke. "Tonight we honour not only our victory, but the women who fought beside us, women of blood, women of honour, who prove the North breeds warriors of all kinds." The hall roared in answer, Shields slammed against the walls, the rhythm like thunder. Freydis lifted her axe in salute, Astrid her spear. They stood tall, unflinching beneath the firelit gaze of their kin. But honour came with weight. Later, when the noise of feasting faded to the softer hum of song, the chieftain summoned the sisters to his side. "You fight like wolves," he said, his voice heavy. "But wolves must know loyalty. Will you swear the blood oath to this clan?" Freydis's eyes narrowed. The blood oath was sacred. To swear it meant binding themselves not just to the clan's victories, but to its defeats, its deaths, its fate. Breaking such an oath invited shame worse than death. Astrid looked at her sister. The fire in Freydis's eyes was clear, but so too was the weight of choice. At last, Freydis nodded. "Bring the blade," she said. The chieftain's knife gleamed in the firelight. Each sister cut her palm, blood spilling freely. They pressed their hands together, blood mingling as the hall grew silent. With this oath, they spoke as one. "We are bound, in battle, in blood, in death. We stand with the clan until the end of days." The hall erupted, horns lifted, voices thundered, and the skald struck his harp to weave the moment into song. From that night forward, the sisters were not only Shieldmaidens, but sworn warriors of the clan, bound by honour and blood. Later, when the feasting waned and the fires dimmed, Astrid whispered to her sister, "We are no longer free wolves, Freydis. We are bound wolves." Freydis smiled faintly, the firelight glinting on her axe. "Then let us be the fiercest wolves the North has ever known." And so the saga of the women of blood and honour began not just warriors, but oath-bound legends whose names would carry through the ages, like the howl of wolves across frozen fjords. At the settlement's edge, shadows moved, patrols, silent and alert, scanning the frozen expanse. Freydis raised her hand, and the Viking raiders froze behind her. She studied the guards, noting their rhythm and timing, then nodded. The signal was given. Chaos erupted in the stillness of dawn. Freydis and her warriors surged forward, shields locked, axes swinging. Snow flew as men fell, screaming, caught off guard by the ferocity of women who moved like winter wolves. The icy ground made footing treacherous, yet the Shieldmaidens used it to their advantage, sliding into foes with deadly momentum. From the high ridge, archers loosed flaming arrows, sending sparks and fear across the enemy ranks. Fires caught thatched roofs, sending thick smoke curling into the sky. The clamour of battle echoed through the fjord, a symphony of steel and defiance. Freydis leapt atop a barricade, her axe cleaving a path through warriors who thought they could stop her. Hours passed in the blur of combat, the bitter cold mingling with the heat of exertion. By midday, the settlement fell, looted and burning. Freydis stood at the centre, chest heaving, breath visible in the icy air, surveying the spoils. Furs, silver and supplies piled high, a testament to Viking courage and ruthlessness. Yet, more than treasure, it was the statement that resonated. Even in winter's harsh grip, the Shieldmaidens of the North would strike with unyielding precision. As the longship carried them back across the frozen fjord, warriors laughed, sang, and toasted with mugs of warm mead. Freydis allowed herself a rare smile, knowing this raid would be recounted for years, another tale of cunning, bravery, and the deadly women who commanded the North. The wind cut like a blade across the frozen plains, as Freydis's longships approached the looming fortress known as the Frozen Keep. Its walls of stone rose from the snow-covered cliffs, blackened by centuries of frost and fire. Smoke curled lazily from the towers, the defenders unaware that a fleet of hardened Viking warriors, led by Shieldmaidens, had come to challenge their dominance. "Steady," Freydis commanded, standing at the prow of the lead ship. Her steel armour gleamed faintly under the pale winter sun, her battle-axe ready, shield strapped securely to her arm. Around her, the crew of Shieldmaidens moved with practised silence, oars gliding through icy waters. Every face reflected the tension of the impending battle. Today, they would either seize the keep or be swallowed by the cold stone walls like so many others before them. The first volley of arrows whistled over their heads as they neared the drawbridge. Freydis signalled with a horn, and her warriors raised their shields, forming a moving wall against the hail of steel-tipped missiles. The water below, partially frozen, creaked with each wave, threatening to break the rhythm of their advance. "Boarders ready!" she shouted, leaping onto the dock first, boots crunching on frost-hardened wood. Her shield met a defender's axe with a loud clash, sparks flying. The keep's guards rushed to repel the attackers, but the Shieldmaidens moved with precision, flanking, striking, and pushing them back into the heart of the fortress. Inside, the corridors were narrow, the air heavy with smoke and the smell of sweat. Freydis led a small team up the spiral staircase to the main tower, the sound of battle echoing below. She could hear the cries of men, the clash of steel, the thrum of arrows striking stone. At the top of the tower, the enemy leader awaited, a broad-shouldered warrior with a cruel smile and a massive sword. "You think a few women can take this keep?" he sneered. "I am no woman you've faced before," Freydis replied, raising her axe. In a blur of motion, she attacked, each strike calculated, exploiting weaknesses in his guard. Around her, her Shieldmaidens fought side by side, using ropes and ladders to bring down barricades, freeing prisoners trapped within the towers. The battle raged for hours, the cold biting through leather and mail, yet the Shieldmaidens pressed relentlessly. With coordinated effort, they set fire to the gates, forcing the remaining defenders into the open where arrows and axes awaited. One by one, the stronghold fell, its walls echoing with the cries of the defeated. By nightfall, the frozen keep was theirs. Freydis stood atop the highest tower, surveying the conquered land, the wind whipping her hair across her face. The victory was hard won, but it solidified her reputation, not only a fearsome warrior, but a master strategist, capable of toppling the strongest of Viking fortresses. Around the fire that night, warriors celebrated with mead, recounting the daring feats that had brought them triumph. Freydis allowed herself a rare smile, knowing the frozen keep would now serve as a beacon, a symbol of the strength and cunning of Shieldmaidens of the north. The wind cut like a blade across the frozen plains, as Freydis's longships approached the looming fortress known as the Frozen Keep. Its walls of stone rose from the snow-covered cliffs, blackened by centuries of frost and fire. Smoke curled lazily from the towers, the defenders unaware that a fleet of hardened Viking warriors, led by Shieldmaidens, had come to challenge their dominance. "Steady," Freydis commanded, standing at the prow of the lead ship. Her steel armour gleamed faintly under the pale winter sun, her battle-axe ready, shield strapped securely to her arm. Around her, the crew of Shieldmaidens moved with practiced silence, oars gliding through icy waters. Every face reflected the tension of the impending battle. Today, they would either seize the keep or be swallowed by the cold stone walls like so many others before them. The first volley of arrows whistled over their heads as they neared the drawbridge. Freydis signalled with a horn, and her warriors raised their shields, forming a moving wall against the hail of steel-tipped missiles. The water below, partially frozen, creaked with each wave, threatening to break the rhythm of their advance. "Boarders ready!" she shouted, leaping onto the dock first, boots crunching on frost-hardened wood. Her shield met a defender's axe with a loud clash, sparks flying. The keep's guards rushed to repel the attackers, but the Shieldmaidens moved with precision, flanking, striking, and pushing them back into the heart of the fortress. Inside, the corridors were narrow, the air heavy with smoke and the smell of sweat. Freydis led a small team up the spiral staircase to the main tower, the sound of battle echoing below. She could hear the cries of men, the clash of steel, the thrum of arrows striking stone. At the top of the tower, the enemy leader awaited, a broad-shouldered warrior with a cruel smile and a massive sword. "You think a few women can take this keep?" he sneered. "I am no woman you've faced before," Freydis replied, raising her axe. In a blur of motion, she attacked, each strike calculated, exploiting weaknesses in his guard. Around her, her Shieldmaidens fought side by side, using ropes and ladders to bring down barricades, freeing prisoners trapped within the towers. The battle raged for hours, the cold biting through leather and mail, yet the Shieldmaidens pressed relentlessly. With coordinated effort, they set fire to the gates, forcing the remaining defenders into the open where arrows and axes awaited. One by one, the stronghold fell, its walls echoing with the cries of the defeated. By nightfall, the frozen keep was theirs. Freydis stood atop the highest tower, surveying the conquered land, the wind whipping her hair across her face. The victory was hard won, but it solidified her reputation, not only a fearsome warrior, but a master strategist, capable of toppling the strongest of Viking fortresses. Around the fire that night, warriors celebrated with mead, recounting the daring feats that had brought them triumph. Freydis allowed herself a rare smile, knowing the frozen keep would now serve as a beacon, a symbol of the strength and cunning of Shieldmaidens of the north. The morning sun glinted off the icy fjords, as Freydis rode at the head of a caravan of longships, each bearing warriors and Shieldmaidens, their banners snapping in the wind. Word of her victory at the frozen keep had spread like wildfire, reaching every Viking settlement along the northern coasts. Leaders, once wary of one another, now approached with cautious respect, seeking alliance rather than conflict. Freydis disembarked at the largest settlement of the north, greeted by Hakon the Red and his veteran warriors. The smell of pine smoke and roasting meat mingled with the crisp sea air as the two leaders met at the council longhouse. Inside, the massive hall was crowded with chieftains, Shieldmaidens, and envoys, their faces etched with both curiosity and suspicion. "Hakon," Freydis said, inclining her head, "your lands suffered from marauders this spring. We cannot fight them alone. We must stand together, or all of us will fall." Hakon's gaze lingered on her battle-worn armour, the scars that spoke louder than words. "You have the respect of many, Freydis, but alliances are fragile. Some men fear the strength of Shieldmaidens leading their forces. They whisper of old customs, of women overstepping their bounds." Freydis leaned forward, her voice steady and commanding. "This is no time for whispers. We need strategy, courage, and unity. I offer you my shield, my warriors, and my counsel. Together, we can ensure the North remains free, untamed by invaders or traitors." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some nodded, seeing the wisdom in her words. Others frowned, reluctant to place trust in a woman's command. But Freydis had long learned the art of persuasion, honed not just in battle, but in navigating the treacherous politics of Viking settlements. She spoke of mutual benefit, trade routes secured, and raiders repelled, framing the alliance not as subservience, but as a shared destiny. By the time the sun dipped low, a pact was forged. 7 northern settlements agreed to unite under a banner of mutual defence, with Freydis acting as chief strategist. Swords were clasped, oaths exchanged over mead, and the hall resounded with the chants of warriors pledging themselves to the cause. Outside, under the first stars of evening, Freydis walked along the frozen shoreline, the sea whispering against the rocks. Leif, ever at her side, broke the silence. "You've done it again. You've united men who would sooner fight each other than an enemy." Freydis allowed herself a small smile. "Unity is as fragile as ice, but it is stronger than any single sword. If we hold this alliance, the North will stand unbroken." From that night onward, the Northern Alliance became a force unmatched in the region. Warrior women trained alongside men, strategies were planned with precision, and the shadow of invaders no longer fell unchallenged upon the coasts. Freydis's name grew in both fear and admiration. Shieldmaidens whispered it as an inspiration, while enemies learned to fear the northern seas that now moved as one under her command. The alliance was more than politics, it was the birth of a northern power forged in fire, blood and steel. And at its centre stood a Shieldmaiden, whose legend would outlive even the tallest mountains of the north. The morning sun glinted off the icy fjords, as Freydis rode at the head of a caravan of longships, each bearing warriors and Shieldmaidens, their banners snapping in the wind. Word of her victory at the frozen keep had spread like wildfire, reaching every Viking settlement along the northern coasts. Leaders, once wary of one another, now approached with cautious respect, seeking alliance rather than conflict. Freydis disembarked at the largest settlement of the north, greeted by Hakon the Red and his veteran warriors. The smell of pine smoke and roasting meat mingled with the crisp sea air as the two leaders met at the council longhouse. Inside, the massive hall was crowded with chieftains, Shieldmaidens, and envoys, their faces etched with both curiosity and suspicion. "Hakon," Freydis said, inclining her head, "your lands suffered from marauders this spring. We cannot fight them alone. We must stand together, or all of us will fall." Hakon's gaze lingered on her battle-worn armour, the scars that spoke louder than words. "You have the respect of many, Freydis, but alliances are fragile. Some men fear the strength of Shieldmaidens leading their forces. They whisper of old customs, of women overstepping their bounds." Freydis leaned forward, her voice steady and commanding. "This is no time for whispers. We need strategy, courage, and unity. I offer you my shield, my warriors, and my counsel. Together, we can ensure the North remains free, untamed by invaders or traitors." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some nodded, seeing the wisdom in her words. Others frowned, reluctant to place trust in a woman's command. But Freydis had long learned the art of persuasion, honed not just in battle, but in navigating the treacherous politics of Viking settlements. She spoke of mutual benefit, trade routes secured, and raiders repelled, framing the alliance not as subservience, but as a shared destiny. By the time the sun dipped low, a pact was forged. 7 northern settlements agreed to unite under a banner of mutual defence, with Freydis acting as chief strategist. Swords were clasped, oaths exchanged over mead, and the hall resounded with the chants of warriors pledging themselves to the cause. Outside, under the first stars of evening, Freydis walked along the frozen shoreline, the sea whispering against the rocks. Leif, ever at her side, broke the silence. "You've done it again. You've united men who would sooner fight each other than an enemy." Freydis allowed herself a small smile. Unity is as fragile as ice, but it is stronger than any single sword. If we hold this alliance, the North will stand unbroken. From that night onward, the Northern Alliance became a force unmatched in the region. Warrior women trained alongside men, strategies were planned with precision, and the shadow of invaders no longer fell unchallenged upon the coasts. Freydis's name grew in both fear and admiration. Shieldmaidens whispered it as an inspiration, while enemies learned to fear the northern seas that now moved as one under her command. The alliance was more than politics, it was the birth of a northern power forged in fire, blood and steel. And at its centre stood a Shieldmaiden, whose legend would outlive even the tallest mountains of the north. The fjord lay silent under a thick morning mist, the waters black and mirror-like, reflecting the looming cliffs that guarded the settlements. Freydis stood at the prow of her longship, her breath visible in the cold air. Word had come from scouts that a rival faction, emboldened by the chaos of fractured northern settlements, planned a dawn raid. This time, the threat was more personal. They aimed not just for plunder, but to destroy the alliance she had forged. Her warriors moved with quiet precision, securing their weapons and checking their shields. Shieldmaidens adjusted leather straps, ensuring their axes and swords would not slip in the ensuing chaos. Freydis's eyes scanned the fjord, noting every inlet and hidden cove. "They think they can take us by surprise," she muttered. a grim smile playing at her lips. They will learn that the north does not bend easily. The first smoke signals appeared, curling above the tree line of a neighbouring settlement. Fire was already consuming the wooden palisades, the scent of burning timber mixing with the tang of salt and iron in the air. Freydis barked orders, and the fleet moved like a shadow across the fjord, oars cutting through the water with deadly rhythm. Every vessel held a contingent of warriors ready for boarding, every archer poised to rain fire upon the enemy. As they approached, the attackers' rafts emerged, clumsy and ill-prepared for the resistance they would face. Freydis signalled with a raised axe, and the archers released flaming arrows. Sails and structures caught instantly, turning the enemy fleet into blazing infernos floating on the dark fjord. Screams and the clash of steel echoed through the mist, the battle erupting in a symphony of violence and fury. Freydis's ship rammed the largest enemy raft, her warriors leaping with practiced precision. Axes swung, shields clashed, and the water churned with bodies struggling to survive. She fought with the precision of a seasoned Shieldmaiden, dodging a swing meant for her head, striking back with a lethal combination of speed and strength. Every movement was calculated, every strike purposeful. From the crow's nest, Leaf shouted warnings, his voice cutting through the chaos. Reinforcements from the cliffs. Freydis turned just in time to block a spear thrust aimed at her heart. She spun, her sword slicing through leather and sinew, sending the assailant tumbling into the fjord. Flames licked at nearby rafts, forcing enemy warriors into panic and disarray. By midday, the fjord was littered with the wreckage of rafts, the bodies of the defeated, and the fires that refused to die. The survivors, those foolish or desperate enough to flee, scattered into the forests and cliffs, leaving the North's settlements unscathed and her alliance unbroken. Freydis stood on the deck of her ship, bloodied but unbowed, the scent of smoke and iron heavy in the air. She lifted her horn, shouting her victory to the fjord, and her warriors answered with a roar that would echo through the northern mountains for generations. The flames on the fjord were a warning to all who dared threaten the north. United, fierce, and led by a Shieldmaiden whose courage burned brighter than any fire, the alliance would not falter. The victory on the fjord still burned in the memories of Freydis's warriors, yet the celebrations were short-lived. Whispers of discontent and secret alliances had begun to surface. Not all Norse settlements shared the same vision. Old grudges, ambitions, and fear festered in the shadows. Freydis sensed it even before the first message arrived, a carefully sealed parchment carried by a hooded rider, the seal cracked and smeared with blood as though to mark urgency. The words inside chilled her blood. One of her trusted allies had been negotiating with a rival faction, promising betrayal in exchange for lands and wealth. Her fingers clenched around the parchment as she read it over and over, trying to imagine how trust could be so fragile. The revelation struck at the heart of the alliance she had fought so fiercely to maintain. Freydis had always relied on loyalty and honour, but now treachery threatened to undo everything. In the great hall, candlelight flickering over long wooden beams, Freydis summoned her closest warriors and council leaders. Faces that had shared blood and battle now displayed cautious fear. "The North's enemies are not only beyond our fjords," she began, her voice calm but commanding. "They are among us. A shadow moves in our midst, seeking to destroy what we have built." Murmurs rippled through the hall, some of shock, others of fear. She did not name the traitor yet. Patience was a weapon as sharp as any sword. Instead, she outlined a plan, increased vigilance, observation, and controlled testing. Spies were dispatched under the guise of routine trading trips. Freydis herself donned a cloak of invisibility, figuratively and literally, walking among her people as a shadowed figure, listening, watching, noting subtle gestures and suspicious interactions. That night, as the northern winds howled outside the longhouse walls, she met with Leif, who who had returned from a scouting mission along the fjord. His face, usually steady and unflinching, showed the weight of the news he bore. "There are movements we did not anticipate," he said quietly. "Merchants, warriors, even a healer, some speak too freely, some act too secretively. The web of betrayal is tangled, and we must untangle it carefully, without revealing that we know." Freydis nodded. Every step had to be calculated. A wrong move could ignite a civil war before the North's unity was fully restored. She began to set traps, subtle tests of loyalty that would reveal intentions without endangering the innocent. Messages left unsupervised, rumors planted, goods redirected, all tools of cunning, as potent as a sharpened blade. As days passed, tension thickened like fog along the fjord. Freydis trained her warriors with renewed intensity, every swing of an axe or thrust of a sword a reminder of what was at stake. The betrayal lingered in the air like a shadow stretching across the northern skies. She would confront it, she promised herself, but only when the time was right. For now, the North needed vigilance, patience, and the cold steel of a Shieldmaiden's will. Even in the warmth of the longhouse fires, Freydis felt the chill of treachery. In the North, battles were not always fought with swords. Some were waged in silence, in cunning, and in the hearts of those who dared to deceive. And she, the Shield Maiden, would not let the shadow win. The betrayal uncovered by Freydis was only the beginning. Once the traitor was revealed, a minor chieftain, whose greed outweighed honour, the northern settlements braced themselves for retaliation. Word had spread like wildfire. The Shield Maiden of the fjords would not tolerate treachery. Freydis called a council in the great hall, the air thick with smoke from torches and the scent of burning pine. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the gathered leaders. "They think deception can undo us," she said. "They will learn that fire answers fire, steel answers steel, and loyalty answers betrayal." Within hours, preparations for a decisive strike were underway. Ships were readied, warriors armed, and scouts sent ahead along winding fjords to monitor enemy movements. Freydis chose a team of her most skilled raiders, including Leif, to lead a rapid assault that would punish the traitor's settlement and send a warning to any who considered crossing her again. The northern wind bit through fur-lined cloaks as ships cut silently through the dark waters, oars muffled and sails furled to avoid detection. By dawn, smoke was visible over the distant hills. The settlement of the betrayer lay exposed, its watchmen caught unprepared. Freydis gave the signal, and fire arrows streaked through the sky, igniting barns, storehouses, and watchtowers. Chaos erupted as warriors stormed the longhouses, shields raised, swords swinging with precision honed from decades of battle. Every move was calculated, no unnecessary bloodshed, only punishment for betrayal. Freydis herself led the charge into the heart of the enemy stronghold. The traitor, realizing too late that his deception had been discovered, attempted to flee. But Freydis was faster, cutting him off with a single, fluid motion. Her blade, glinting in the morning sun, caught the first rays as she drove him to his knees. The Council of Allied Settlements had demanded justice, and justice would be delivered swiftly and decisively. The flames reflected off the fjord waters, painting the scene in gold and crimson. Survivors fled into the forest, pursued by raiders who spared none who resisted. Others were captured, bound, and brought to Freydis's fleet for judgment. She spared the innocents, the women, children, and the sick, but made clear that treachery would carry a heavy price. News of the assault spread quickly, and neighbouring settlements took heed. The Shield Maiden's warning was unmistakable. The North would not tolerate betrayal. As the fleet returned, triumphant but weary, Freydis allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The fjords, bathed in the morning light, seemed serene, belying the destruction left in her wake. She knew vengeance was not an act of anger alone, but a tool of survival in the ruthless world of Viking politics. Leif approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. They will think twice before crossing you again, he said quietly. Freydis nodded, eyes scanning the horizon where smoke still curled from burning settlements. Let them remember the flames of vengeance, she replied. Let them know that honour and loyalty are the true shields of the north. With that, the fleet returned to their settlement, the fires of justice leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of friend and foe alike. The north would remember, and Freydis's legend grew ever larger, a warning and inspiration in equal measure. The fjords were shrouded in mist as Freydis's fleet returned to port, the silver dawn casting ghostly reflections on the water. The victory from the previous night had been decisive, yet the Shieldmaiden knew better than to believe the north would remain calm for long. Whispers of vengeance already floated on the wind, carried by returning traders and fleeing scouts. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon for the first sign of trouble. Inside the longhouse, the council gathered again. The warriors' bodies were weary, their arms bruised and blistered, yet their spirits burned with the knowledge that they had survived impossible odds. Freydis rose from her seat, her voice calm but commanding. The fjords are ours tonight, but shadows linger. Enemies who have not yet revealed themselves move unseen. We cannot rest on yesterday's triumph. We must anticipate the next strike. Her advisers nodded, familiar with the Shieldmaiden's prescience. Leif, standing beside her, ran a hand over the map, etched into the table. Reports indicate unusual activity along the northern coast, he said. Small raiding parties have been sighted, perhaps scouting for weaknesses. They are testing us. Freydis's jaw tightened. Then we will give them something to remember. Not just fire and steel this time, but deception. Let the shadows of the fjords fight for us. Over the following days, Freydis orchestrated a series of feints and ambushes. Small fishing boats were sent with false cargo, carrying decoys meant to draw enemy eyes. Watchers hid along cliffs and in dense forests, signalling when the shadow parties approached. Every movement was calculated, every strategy designed to confuse and terrify. The fjords themselves became weapons, narrow channels funneling invaders into traps, sudden rocks, and hidden spikes lying in wait beneath the waves. One evening, as the sun sank behind jagged peaks, a small fleet appeared on the horizon. Their black sails were ghost-like against the twilight sky. Freydis's heart quickened not with fear, but with anticipation. She had prepared for this, and the shadow of the fjords would become their doom. Rowing silently from hidden coves, her warriors emerged from the mist. Fire arrows arced through the fading light, landing on deck and sending enemy ships into panic. Chaos erupted, but in a controlled, strategic manner. Freydis led a boarding party, her sword singing as it cut through the first line of opposition. Her warriors moved as one, a coordinated storm of steel and fury. Shadows danced across the decks, the mist concealing their numbers until it was too late. By midnight, the enemy was shattered, their ships abandoned or sunk, the fjords silent once more except for the lapping of waves against bloodied hulls. Freydis stood at the prow, her chest heaving, eyes scanning the horizon. The north was vast and wild, filled with hidden dangers, but she had learned its secrets. The fjords had become allies, the shadows her silent warriors. Victory was hers again, but the Shieldmaiden knew the shadows never slept. They waited, and so would she, ready for the next challenge the north dared to send. Smoke curled across the horizon like a serpent, a dark warning of destruction. Freydis tightened her grip on the hilt of her sword, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Word had arrived that a rival settlement, emboldened by rumours of her victories, had raided a small coastal village allied with her people. Homes had burned, livestock slaughtered, and survivors left to die. The northern wind carried the scent of charred timber, and Freydis vowed it would carry fire in return. Her fleet was ready in hours, warriors eager to avenge their fallen kin. Ships cut through the icy fjord waters with the silent precision of trained raiders. Freydis led from the front, her raven-emblazoned shield gleaming in the early light. Every rower moved with synchronized determination, muscles straining against oars, hearts beating in unison with the call of battle. She surveyed the northern coast, scanning for the enemy encampment rumoured to be hidden in the cliffs above the fjord. By midday, the settlement came into view. Smoke rose from the rooftops, but the enemy was unaware of the storm approaching beneath the mist. Freydis's eyes glinted. "We strike before they realize the north has awakened," she commanded. Her warriors readied their bows, axes, and spears, their faces set with grim determination. Fires would consume their foes, but they would also reclaim honor. As the fleet approached, archers released flaming arrows, igniting storehouses and watchtowers. Panic erupted as the enemy scrambled to organize defenses. Freydis's warriors leapt ashore, shields interlocked, moving as a single unstoppable wave. Steel clashed with steel, cries of battle ringing across the fjord. Freydis cut through the first line of defenders, her sword precise, swift, and deadly. Each strike was a message. The north could not be defied with impunity. The enemy commander, a massive man with a blood-red cloak, tried to rally his forces. Freydis met him at the centre of the chaos, shield raised. The clash of their weapons rang like thunder across the fjord. She ducked and spun, striking at the gaps in his armour. Sparks flew as steel met steel, each moment a test of strength, skill, and will. Around them, her warriors pressed the advantage, pushing the invaders back toward the burning structures. By nightfall, the northern settlement was engulfed in flames, its defenders either slain or fleeing into the woods. Freydis stood atop a ridge, overlooking the fjord, her chest heaving, eyes surveying the destruction below. The fires were both punishment and warning. News of her fury would spread, reaching rival settlements before they could even consider rebellion. Her warriors cheered, raising their weapons in victory, yet Freydis knew the north was far from tamed. These fires were only a prelude. The shadow of her name had grown across the fjords, but more storms were coming. She had become more than a shield maiden. She was the wrath and the reckoning of the north, and her saga would burn in memory as fiercely as the fires she left in her wake. The hall was lit by firelight, its shadows dancing across the carved beams as the Shieldmaidens stood in silence. Their armour bore the scars of countless battles, their shields cracked, their swords dulled from years of war. But tonight was not about the past. Tonight was about the oath that would bind them forever. Freydis, tall and unyielding, stepped forward. Her voice carried above the crackle of the flames. Too many of our sisters lie buried beneath northern soil. Too many of our brothers have fallen to the axe and the spear. But we are not finished. By steel and by blood, we swear that the Shieldmaidens shall never fade from the saga of the north. Her words were not mere speech, they were thunder. The women slammed their shields in unison, the echo rolling through the hall like distant war drums. Each Shieldmaiden cut her palm with a blade, the blood dripping onto the central fire. One by one, they whispered their vow, voices joining in a chorus that was half prayer, half battle cry. They knew what this oath meant. No turning back, no retreat. Their lives, their strength, their honour, bound together until the end. Outside, the wind howled across the fjords, as if the gods themselves bore witness. The raven, sacred bird of Odin, circled above the longhouse, a dark omen, or perhaps a blessing. With their oath sworn, the Shieldmaidens prepared for what was to come. They reforged their weapons, polished their shields, and sharpened their spears until they gleamed in the torchlight. This was not the end of their saga, it was the rebirth of their fury. But as the night deepened, an uneasy silence settled. For while they had sworn their loyalty to each other, whispers spread that not all who once stood among them could be trusted. Treachery lingered like smoke, unseen but choking the air. And so the oath of steel and blood was sealed not just a vow of unity, but a challenge to the fates themselves. The Shieldmaidens had tied their destiny to one another, and the gods would soon test whether that bond was unbreakable. The north would burn again. The hall was lit by firelight, its shadows dancing across the carved beams as the Shieldmaidens stood in silence. Their armour bore the scars of countless battles, their shields cracked, their swords dulled from years of war. But tonight was not about the past. Tonight was about the oath that would bind them forever. Freydis, tall and unyielding, stepped forward. Her voice carried above the crackle of the flames. Too many of our sisters lie buried beneath northern soil. Too many of our brothers have fallen to the axe and the spear. But we are not finished. By steel and by blood, we swear that the Shieldmaidens shall never fade from the saga of the north. Her words were not mere speech, they were thunder. The women slammed their shields in unison, the echo rolling through the hall like distant war drums. Each Shieldmaiden cut her palm with a blade, the blood dripping onto the central fire. One by one, they whispered their vow, voices joining in a chorus that was half prayer, half battle cry. They knew what this oath meant. No turning back, no retreat. Their lives, their strength, their honour, bound together until the end. Outside, the wind howled across the fjords, as if the gods themselves bore witness. The raven, sacred bird of Odin, circled above the longhouse, a dark omen, or perhaps a blessing. With their oath sworn, the Shieldmaidens prepared for what was to come. They reforged their weapons, polished their shields, and sharpened their spears until they gleamed in the torchlight. This was not the end of their saga, it was the rebirth of their fury. But as the night deepened, an uneasy silence settled. For while they had sworn their loyalty to each other, whispers spread that not all who once stood among them could be trusted. Treachery lingered like smoke, unseen but choking the air. And so the oath of steel and blood was sealed not just a vow of unity, but a challenge to the fates themselves. The Shieldmaidens had tied their destiny to one another, and the gods would soon test whether that bond was unbreakable. The north would burn again. The flames roared against the night sky, leaping high above the longhouse like the breath of a dragon. The Shieldmaidens had set the pyres alight, not for mourning, but for defiance. The fire was their beacon, their declaration to gods and men alike that their will would never die. Freydis stood before the blaze, her silhouette cut against the inferno. Her hand rested on the haft of her axe, her face streaked with ash. Around her, the others gathered in a circle, their shields reflecting the glow. This was no simple ritual. This was the rebirth of their war. "We are the flame," Freydis cried, her voice carrying into the storm winds. "We are the fire that cannot be quenched, not by steel, nor treachery, nor the will of kings. When our enemies see these flames, let them tremble, for as long as fire burns, so do we." The Shieldmaidens slammed their shields against the earth in rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The sound echoed like the heartbeat of the north itself. Sparks flew into the night, swirling like spirits freed from their chains. Astrid stepped forward, throwing her broken spear into the blaze. "Let the past burn," she declared, her eyes sharp with resolve. "We forge new weapons, and with them we forge new fates." Others followed. Shattered shields, dented helms, and blood-stained banners were tossed into the fire. The flames consumed it all, turning loss into light. Every Shieldmaiden's voice rose in song, not the gentle songs of hearth and home, but the war chants of their foremothers, the kind sung on longships crossing stormy seas, the kind that promised no mercy. But as the flames grew higher, a shadow stirred at the edges of the gathering. A rider approached on a black horse, cloaked and hooded. The Shieldmaidens fell silent, their hands instinctively gripping their blades. The rider dismounted, walking into the circle of firelight. His voice was low, ragged. "The kings of the south gather armies. They have sworn to end your defiance. The fire you light tonight," he gestured toward the pyres, "will be seen as a challenge, and they will answer it." The Shieldmaidens exchanged glances. Fear did not grip them, fire did. Freydis raised her axe once more, the fire painting her face in gold and blood red. "Let them come," she said, her tone like steel striking steel. "We do not run from flames, we are the flames." The night erupted with cheers, the fire towering above them as if the gods themselves stoked it. Ravens circled overhead, black wings cutting across the moon. The Shieldmaidens had declared war not just against men, but against fate itself. The fire that never dies had been lit, and soon the whole north would burn. The Shieldmaidens had sworn their oath in fire and blood, yet even the strongest chains can crack when shadow creeps in. Betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from those who once stood beside you, sharing bread, sharing battle, sharing trust. The hall was tense that night. The women feasted after the pyre ritual, their laughter mingling with the smell of roasted boar and mead. Yet, beneath the noise, there was an unease. Freydis noticed it first. A glance held too long, a whisper exchanged too quickly. Her instincts, sharpened on battlefields, told her something was wrong. She rose, her eyes sweeping the room. "Speak," she demanded. "If there are doubts, let them be voiced. Better steal in the open than poison in the dark." For a long moment, silence. Then Astrid slammed her fist on the table. "There is a traitor among us." The hall erupted into shouts. Shieldmaidens accused one another, voices rising like clashing swords. But Freydis raised her hand, silencing them. "Bring her forward." From the shadows, a woman was dragged into the firelight. Sigrun, once a sister in arms. Her face was pale, her eyes cold. At her feet was a sack of silver, stamped with the crest of a southern king. Gasps filled the hall. The betrayal was undeniable. Freydis's jaw tightened. "You would sell us for silver? Trade our lives for the favour of kings who would see us chained and broken?" Sigrun met her gaze without flinching. "I choose survival, you choose death. When their armies come, you will burn with your pride. I will live." The Shieldmaidens roared in fury, blades drawn, their loyalty to one another tested like never before. But Freydis stepped forward, her axe gleaming in the firelight. "Then live no longer." The clash was brutal. Sigrun fought like a cornered wolf, her blade fast and desperate, but she was no match for the fury of sisters she had betrayed. Freydis struck the final blow, her axe burying deep into the wooden floor beside Sigrun's fallen body, a warning carved into the hall itself. The Shieldmaidens stood in silence, the air heavy with smoke and betrayal. Trust, once broken, does not heal easily. Even as Sigrun's lifeless form was carried away, doubt lingered like a ghost among them. Freydis spoke at last, her voice steady but laced with fire. "Let this be our lesson. The South will not defeat us with steel alone. They will use whispers, gold, and fear. From this day forward, we trust only those who have bled beside us." The women raised their shields in grim agreement. Yet deep inside, each of them wondered how many more blades of betrayal would strike before their saga reached its end. The Shieldmaidens had survived betrayal once, but shadows have a way of returning. The sea was black as iron, the waves rising like mountains beneath the Shieldmaidens' longship. Their sails snapped in the wind, painted with symbols of wolves, ravens, and dragons. It was said that this voyage would be their last, not because they feared death, but because they sailed into waters no Viking had dared before. Freydis stood at the prow, her cloak whipping in the storm. Her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for the jagged coastline where their fate awaited. Behind her, the Shieldmaidens rode in rhythm, their voices chanting an old song, one sung by raiders long before them. "Row, sisters, row, to blood, to fire, to glory." Every word carried across the waves like thunder. They were not sailing to raid villages or to seek silver. They were sailing for something far greater, vengeance. The southern kings who had conspired with Sigrun had united armies, forging a massive force meant to crush the Shieldmaidens once and for all. Freydis would not wait for their ships to come north. She would meet them head-on, in their own waters, and carve her legend into their coasts. The longship cut through the storm, as though Odin himself guided it. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating their shields and spears, their faces set with grim determination. Some whispered that this voyage would be their doom, but no one dared turn back. Better to die at sea, sword in hand, than to waste away in fear. As dawn broke, land appeared, a distant strip of jagged cliffs and smoke curling from villages beyond. The women tightened their grips on their weapons. This was not just another raid, this was war. Freydis raised her axe high. This voyage is our last because we will make it so. After today, there will be no kings bold enough to challenge us, no armies foolish enough to hunt us. The North will remember our names until the end of time. The Shieldmaidens roared in answer, slamming their shields together until the sound rolled across the waves like thunder. As the longship struck the shallows, the women leapt into the surf, their boots splashing, their weapons raised. The village before them stirred in panic bells ringing, men scrambling for arms, women dragging children to safety. The Shieldmaidens advanced, not as raiders, but as a storm made flesh. Fire licked the thatch of houses, steel clashed against steel, and screams rose into the sky. This was no longer about plunder. This was vengeance, and vengeance burned brighter than gold. When the smoke cleared, the Shieldmaidens stood upon the cliffs, their longship below, their enemies broken behind them. The voyage north would never be forgotten, for it was not a voyage of return, it was the voyage that carved their saga into the heart of the world. And though they stood victorious, Freydis gazed at the horizon, knowing this was only the beginning of the war to come. The last voyage north had begun. The battlefield was silent, but the silence was heavier than war itself. Smoke coiled from the ruins of burning villages, the scent of ash mingling with blood. The Shieldmaidens stood in formation, their shields dented, their armour cracked, their faces streaked with dirt and crimson. They had won, but victory was no longer the triumph it once was. Their numbers were fewer now. Too many sisters had fallen, their bodies carried away by ravens and wolves. Those who remained felt the weight of every loss pressing on their hearts like iron. Freydis leaned on her axe, her breath sharp, her eyes burning with defiance. "This is the twilight of our order," she said, her voice carrying across the weary women. "But twilight is not the end. Twilight is when the sky burns brightest before the night takes hold. We will blaze so fiercely that even the gods will remember us." The women raised their shields in answer, though their arms trembled with exhaustion. The twilight of the Shieldmaidens was not to be a fading into obscurity. It was to be their fiercest stand, their greatest defiance. Word had spread of the Shieldmaidens' wrath. Kings and jarls across the lands now united against them. Armies gathered, banners darkening the horizon. For the first time, the Shieldmaidens faced not scattered warbands or villages, but a storm of thousands, determined to end them once and for all. That night, they sat together beneath the stars, sharing the last of their mead, speaking of their fallen sisters. Some sang songs, voices breaking on names that would never be forgotten. Others sharpened blades, though they knew their weapons might not be enough. Yet none spoke of surrender. Freydis lifted a horn of mead. "Tomorrow we fight for the last time. Not for gold, not for land, but for the honour of our name. The Shieldmaidens will not be erased. If we must fall, let us fall as fire, not as ash." The women roared in agreement, a sound that rolled like thunder through the night. And so dawn broke, red as blood, across the sky. The Shieldmaidens marched onto the field, their formation small but unyielding, their banners tattered but still flying. Across the plain, the enemy's countless ranks stretched like a sea of steel. For a moment, the world was silent, and then the clash began. Axes rose and fell, shields splintered, spears shattered. The Shieldmaidens fought as if possessed by the Valkyries themselves, each strike a hymn of defiance, each death a sacrifice to eternity. The twilight had come, but in that twilight, the Shieldmaidens burned brighter than ever before. The field was quiet now, save for the corps of ravens circling above. The Shieldmaidens lay scattered across the earth, their shields broken, their banners torn, their bodies resting in the embrace of death. Yet even in ruin, there was triumph, for the ground itself seemed to sing with the memory of their defiance. Freydis, her axe still clutched in her hand, stood among the fallen. Blood streaked her face, her armor shattered, but her spirit unbroken. She looked to the horizon, where the first light of dawn pierced through the mist. To her, it was not a sunrise of defeat, but the birth of legend. The enemy king approached the field, his armies behind him, expecting submission, expecting fear, but what he found was silence, a silence so heavy, so powerful, that his men dared not cheer. For even in death, the Shieldmaidens glared from the ground, eyes wide and fierce, as though Valkyries had already carried their spirits to Odin's hall. And then the stories began. The few who survived fled into the north, carrying tales of the Shieldmaidens' final stand. They spoke of women who fought with the fury of storms, who carved through armies like fire through dry grass, who laughed in the face of death. They told of Freydis, who swung her axe until the very end, her cry echoing like thunder, "We are the daughters of the north." Skalds took up these tales, weaving them into sagas, sung beside the hearth for generations. Children grew up hearing of the Shieldmaidens, not as mortals, but as near-divine warriors who defied kings and armies. Farmers whispered their names as prayers for protection. Young women sharpened their blades, inspired by the fire of their example. And so, though the Shieldmaidens' bodies lay in the earth, their spirit rose higher than ever. They became more than warriors. They became Valkyries in the memory of their people, symbols of courage, defiance, and unbreakable will. Freydis' name was spoken in the same breath as Odin and Thor. Her deeds were not forgotten, for she had carved them into the bones of the world. Wherever warriors lifted a sword, wherever raiders raised a sail, they carried her spirit with them. The Shieldmaidens did not vanish in the twilight. They burned so fiercely that their fire became eternal. And so it is said, when the storm howls across the northern seas, when the thunder cracks and the ravens fly low, the Shieldmaidens ride again, their laughter carried on the wind, their axes flashing like lightning. For legends never die. They become the heartbeat of the north,